Attorney Brooks? Hello, can you hear me? Attorney Brooks? Yeah, hello, can you hear me? Hi, Attorney Brooks. I just want to make sure that you can hear me. And if you can hear me, we're just they're signing in again. Okay.
We've signed in.
I got you this time. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, good. Okay, good.
So is it just you, or is it you and someone else? Is it you and your staff?
Yes, me and staff.
Okay. So who do we have? Paralegals, other attorneys,
Paralegals and legal assistant.
and legal what?
All right, Cassandra Chris, Maria Grinaldi, and Renee Brinkley.
Okay. So paralegals and another attorney?
No. A legal assistant here.
Oh, I got you. Okay, good. All right. So and thank you all for coming today. What I wanted to do is just kind of go over a little bit about injury diagnosis. I was with Attorney Brooks, I think last week, and we were talking a little bit about ligament injuries, which is mostly what you do auto, or do you do work comp? Do you do just auto and like home injury type stuff, or do you do work comp as well?
We do work comp as well.
Okay, good. So what I did is I just put together just a tiny presentation. I do a lot of different presentations, so I'm going to kind of go over, what I titled this was what a smart injury doctor is really the key for making life easier for a smart injury lawyer or the staff. And just so you guys have never heard me, you don't know who I am, my name is Jeffrey Kronk, Dr. Kronk. I've been one of the top spinal ligament injury trainers in the country for a long time. Treating doctor of chiropractic for 17 years. I developed two, and there's a typo here on this slide. I developed two national spinal ligament testing companies. The current one that I'm a part of is the only medical company in the nation that uses board certified radiologists to do what's called excessive motion testing of the spine. I'll explain more about that in just a bit. I developed and expanded the technology used by medical radiologists. We call our process at Spinal Kinetics computerized radiographic mensuration analysis. So computerized is done on a computer. Radiographic, it's done on x-rays. And mensuration analysis is measurement analysis. So we measure things on x-rays. We measure the amount of excessive motion on x-rays. That term CRMA is trademarked to Spinal Kinetics. We're the only one in the country that's what we called our process. I've trained more radiologists than anyone in the country on that process. I've delivered more webinars on the topic over the last, even though you may not have ever heard me, over the last, I've been doing this since 2005, so over the last 13 years, I've delivered programs to attorneys, insurance defense firms, insurance companies themselves on spinal ligament injuries. I developed the first online doctor's training program specific to this condition. I'm the board of directors of a publicly traded company that does medical records documentation for higher risk medical procedures like disc surgeries, injections, anything that's invasive. They video the whole procedure. I'm on the advisory board for the National Pain Foundation. I have a law degree with special emphasis in PI. I'm not a practicing attorney. I'm not a lawyer, a licensed lawyer. So I just have a degree in law. But there's no one in the market today that has more experience training doctors in this particular area. I've published research. This is a research paper that we published on the fact that you can't evaluate spinal ligament injuries without x-ray interpretation that's computerized. And I'll explain that as we go. We published some papers that said, hey, is a simple sprain from a whiplash injury really that simple? And we started to actually put together how significant these injuries actually are. I published spinal pain, maybe it's not all in your head, to indicate that it is a physical phenomena and it's not a mental condition for patients. In February 2019, we'll be launching the largest injury help site in the country for patients. And this will be a place where patients can quickly search out their best local injury help in all areas of health, whether it's work comp, whether it's auto injuries. This site will probably be, by the time we're done, about a $2 or $2.5 million site. So pretty much everyone in the injury space in some form will probably be doing business with us in the future. And one of the things that this site is designed to do is it's designed to educate the public on what to look for in a doctor. Whether you have a knee injury or an ankle injury or a back injury or a neck injury, a whiplash injury, a lifting injury at work, back and neck are the two most prevalent injuries. So I've got a lot of experience in the injury market, a lot of experience. So we're going to talk about today, though, is diagnosis. So one of the things I train smart injury doctors, they do three things extremely well. They diagnose the condition so they don't miss it. They don't miss conditions. And I'll show you how important that is to what you guys do in a legal practice. It's obvious, but I think it'll become more obvious as we go here. They're able to get great results for the injuries that they treat, and they're able to do a stellar job with documentation so the patients have access to any benefits they're entitled to. So they're very helpful to anyone in the injury market, whether it's the attorney, the insurer, the patient. They're helpful to everybody in the injury market. So one of the things with injury diagnosis is a lot like, personal damage to like a house. This house is obviously injured. And in order to get fair value for the recovery, somebody has to go in and document everything that was injured. So when that tree hit, it happened to be raining, and the damage it did to the roof caused water damage throughout the house. Well, if somebody doesn't come in and actually get all of the damage listed, you're going to have a problem with the claim and getting fair value for the damage recovery to that home. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, that is the biggest issue that you have in your office, and it has been for the last, how long have you been practicing for, Attorney Brooks?
About 35 years.
Good. It's been the same problem for 35 years in your office, and that is a lot of times the documentation is very poor as to what the injuries are with the patient, and that makes the whole process harder. So most injury damage reports are deficient in reporting the actual damage, and that's where I'm going to spend some time with you today on. Now, the information I'm showing you, I'm going to show you pretty quickly. We'll get to some question and answers at the end. I'm going to tell you that I'm going to show it to you quickly. I don't want you to get stuck in any one point. And I think what you're going to see is, as attorneys understand this information, it can make a huge difference in your practice and a huge difference in your ability to go out and get more work, because you understand the providers even better that are providing the work. So right now in this slide, low back, guy up here, is the #1 cause of pain and disability. It's the most expensive injury there is in the market, is a low back injury. The fourth most expensive injury in the market is a neck injury. The 6th most expensive condition in the market is headaches, which are caused from a neck injury. So the #1 cause of chronic pain and disability in the US and in the world today is a lumbar problem. The #4 cause of pain and disability, chronic pain and disability, and costs in the world today and in the US is a neck problem. #6 is headaches. So just to kind of, I know you guys are dealing in the injury, but just to kind of put this in perspective a little bit, in 2013, this is the injury market. This is the amount that's spent in the injury market. It's $820 billion industry. Just to give you some comparison, the US defense budget in 2013 was probably like $570 billion. So this dwarfs what we spend every year in defense. So your two main areas that you're most familiar with is going to be work comp, work comp, 182 billion, and motor vehicle, 264. Obviously, there's home injuries, and then there's injuries that occur outside of the home that are not in a motor vehicle accident or not at work, and those are considered public injuries. So that's the injury market. If we get to just the back and neck portion of it and just the medical costs per year, in 2012, they generated $253 billion worth of payments into the system. That's a large, obviously that's a large amount of money. Now, in work comp, the costs are getting to be quite staggering, with average employer work costs are, according to the National Security Council, they're at 42,000 per medically consulted injury. And in the state of California, they're at 67,000. Different states, different numbers. Okay. The biggest area of cost is, again, in low back and neck injuries. I'm just going to give you the American Pain Association, American Pain Society, publishes in their low back guidelines that if a person has chronic low back pain, medical treatment, and to manage this condition, not to correct it, just to manage it, is 9 to 19,000 per patient annually. These are published numbers. And I know that a lot of times when you're getting beaten down on numbers, you're looking at the personal injury case and you're going, okay, we want to sell this for $12,000. And the person has, chronic neck pain, or they have chronic low back pain. And you go, gosh, on the chronic low back pain, maybe you've seen information like this, maybe you haven't, but the costs in the market are quite substantial. So the reason why I bring that up, though, is because now I'm looking, this is in work comp, but it doesn't matter if we take work comp or we take auto. Sprains and strains account for over 40% of all lost time injuries for many years now. Back injuries and lower back continue to be the #1 cause of business loss. Now, a sprain is a ligament injury and a strain is a muscle injury. You all know that, right?
Right.
Okay. So anytime you damage a muscle, you say you strained it. Anytime you damage the ligament, the tissue that holds the joint together, that's called a sprain. Now, spinal sprains cause excessive motion, which is called spinal instability, and disc herniations, or both. Today, many calculators place a $50,000 price tag on just one back injury. However, if they get into any sort of a surgical problem, it adds up to $275,000 or more over time. So the amount of costs in the market are quite significant. That's why you see JP Morgan, Amazon, and Berkshire Hathaway farming their own health company now to manage their 1.1 million workers, because they feel that they can do a lot better job because the costs have escalated so badly on the injuries. Now, when we get to the spine and spinal ligament injuries, this is where I want to spend some time with you guys today. A spinal motion unit, which is 2 vertebrae held together, has 10 ligaments that hold it together, only one of which is a disc. So the disc, 23 intervertebral discs, are what are in the spine. However, there's more than 220 specialized ligaments that hold the spine together. So when we talk about MRI is a study for about 10% of the disc, or 10% of the ligament structure in the spine. So it's very good at picking up information about that one ligament, but it's very limited in what it can assess as far as ligament damage. And that's the part that a lot of attorney firms get confused with, just simply because they've never trained, they don't understand. No one's ever taught them about the ligament injury itself. So what I have up here on a slide, this is a slide that I put up for the public, for attorneys, for doctors. This says in the middle, the symptoms of a spinal ligament injury. Now, this comes right off of Medscape. So if you go to Medscape and go cervical sprain, you're going to see these are the symptoms that they say are common with a cervical sprain. And they will commonly say, obviously, and if cervical or lumbar injury, mid back pain, lower back pain, migraine headaches, shoulder pain, scapular pain, pain radiating down the arms, ear pain, ringing in the ears, neck pain. You could have concussive syndrome, which basically leads to disturbances in memory. The person can actually they can have loss of voice, they can have visual disturbances with it. these are all actually agreed upon symptoms of a spinal ligament injury. Now, diagnosis is you look at the symptoms and you work your way to the most simplest physical cause that's causing it. So that's what diagnosis is. But in order to understand injury diagnosis today, especially in the injury market, especially in the spine, you got to understand what mechanism of injury is. And I do a lot of training, so I get very basic because we have to get to the basics first in order to really understand. So the mechanism is a natural or established process by which something takes place. So this is the mechanism which can then deliver an injury. An injury is a derangement. So all injuries to body parts are just derangements, and obviously derangement or derangements means to disturb the order, arrangement, or functioning of. So if I look at this, this is the derangement. Now, the only thing that would cause that, you know, one could say, well, you look at this and say, well, did you get shot? You look at this is a derangement pattern, and no one would say to this person, no doctor at least should be able to say to this person, you know, did you get shot? Obviously, you've been burned. What were you burned with? Same with this. They wouldn't say, well, have you been shot or have you been burned? They'd say, have you been bit? Right? So all mechanisms, which is the delivery system of the force, all mechanisms leave derangement patterns behind when they damage the body parts. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Okay, so there is no way to injure a human body without deranging it. So if you're sitting there and somebody's saying, well, we don't believe the person's injured, it's because the derangements have not been identified. And so if you look at this guy right here, he got hit by a car, right? So he's in a car accident. He has an auto injury and there's no damage to the car. Would anybody say because there's no damage to the car, he's not damaged? No. So that issue would never come up. And that's because you can actually see the derangements. Well, internally, they're just as easy to see. They really are. So anytime that a person is in an auto accident or they lift something or they have a slip and fall and they damage their spine, there's two forces that occur. It's called compressive and shear forces. And the shear forces shear the ligaments. The compressive forces cause the ligaments to actually, in the case of a disc, herniate. So there's really only three spinal injury patterns, derangements that can happen to the spine. Two are ligament findings and one is a fracture finding. So we can break it. And as long as if we break it, but we don't damage any of the soft tissue, it's pretty benign injury. So I don't know if you've ever seen like a spinous process fracture or where somebody's fractured their you know, they chip off the transverse process. Sometimes the patient doesn't even know they have it, right? So fractures themselves are very benign if they don't damage the soft tissue. If they damage the soft tissue, so you've all heard the idea of it's just a soft tissue injury, right? Everybody's heard it. Okay, so it should be it's just a hard tissue injury, because hard tissues, when damaged, they repair very quickly. And they repair very completely. They do a great job in repair. It's the soft tissues that don't. So your brain, your heart, your spinal cord, your nerves, every piece of tissue that's like really valuable that you don't want to damage at all is soft. So when somebody says it's just a soft tissue injury, I want to say, okay, well, if we stuck a ice pick through your heart and just said it was a soft tissue injury, what are you going to say? I mean, if we basically opened up your head and scooped out about 6 scoops of your brain and said, well, that's just a soft tissue injury, it's the most critical tissues in the body are soft. And the most critical issues that cause the most amount of chronic pain in the country and in the world today are the soft tissue injuries to the ligaments of the spine. So lumbar number 1, neck number 4. And when you look at derangement patterns, yes, you can have a disc herniation. Remember we said 23 of these. You can have a disc herniation. The other that are actually more problematic than a disc herniation is excessive motion. So if you have a fracture, doctors are going to pick that up on an X-ray or a CT. If you have a disc herniation, doctors are going to pick that up on an MRI. If you have excessive motion, they're only going to pick it up on X-ray. They're not going to pick it up on MRI. And even if you have weight-bearing MRI, which you do in your area, I believe, they're not going to pick it up because they're not going to measure for it because they don't have the technology to do it. So this is called an angulation pattern. This is where the spine vertebra open up too much and they angulate too much. This is called a translation pattern where one vertebra slips over the top of the other. So you have translation and angulation. This is the upper cervical spine. And this shows you, so I'm going to show you a little bit bigger picture of these. So this is normal. This is what normal looks like. This is very abnormal. The only way that occurs is with significant ligament damage in the upper cranial cervical junction. That's where the head attaches to the spine. So this is what an angular finding looks like, and this is what a translation finding looks like. And obviously this is what a disc herniation looks like. These are picked up on X-ray, and they're not picked up on MRI at all. These are picked up on MRI. Now, for the longest time in the market, the most prevalent thing that everybody thinks they need to have is an MRI. And I'm fine with MRI as long as the people that are using it understand that it's very limited when it comes to ligament injuries. It only picks up generally the disc, which is only one of the other. There's 9 other ligaments around just around this to hold this to this. There are 9 other ligaments around this. So one of the things that's interesting, this was just published in June of 2018, and they did a study and said, look, if we have offsets here, if we have offsets right here, it is 93% sensitive for the fact that if you do an MRI, you're going to have a disc herniation here. It is 100% specific if this is not here. So if it looks like the C3, C4, if there is no ligament damage here, it's 100% specific that you will not see a disc herniation there. That's how powerful X-ray is becoming. So the other thing is whenever you have a permanent injury, there's a book called the Permanent, Guides to Evaluation of Permanent Impairment. And a lot of people get really confused, especially if you're doing both work comp and auto, in the fact that some jurisdictions dictate what guides you are to be using in the work comp arena. Or they'll say, we don't use the AMA guides in this state. What that means is in their work comp, somebody took these guidelines and they did something that was modified, and now they call them state guidelines, and they say they don't use these straight. So there's a lot of confusion, but the bottom line is these things are the Kelley Blue Book for the body. So you damage your car, Kelley Blue Book tells you how much decreased in value your car has. You damage a body part, this book tells you how much it's going to cause interference with your activities of daily living. Nice thing is, this is all consensus driven. So just to kind of give you an idea, this is a chart out of table 1515 out of the AMA Guides 5th edition, and I apologize, this is a little blurry. I didn't notice that was blurry. These excessive motion always have had a significantly higher impairment rating associated with them than disc herniations. So disc herniations are here, 15 to 18%. So what this means is that 15 to 18% of the person's activities of daily living will be negatively influenced if they have a disc herniation. Now, if they have a disc herniation that actually treats with great results, the AMA still says that could cause them 5 to 8% problems with their activities of daily living. Now, if they have excessive motion in the spine, the AMA says it's a 25% whole person impairment. 25% of their activities of daily living. Now, that is a very strong consensus statement for excessive motion. And it's been there since 1993. It's not new. It's been there for a long time. So what a lot of doctors do, obviously they take your client in, and let's just say this client has neck pain and headaches, and they're at an 8. We train doctors to actually and assist doctors with the documentation where they start to do a spinal instability correlation form. That's where the patient fills out a form. You've seen these before. And the doctor is starting to correlate that to a specific level. Now, he actually, hold on. Let's get out of, oh, I have one slide missing. So he would then go in, let me see. Oh, I have it missing. So he would go in then and examine the patient, and he would do some specific testing to test the specific levels, those levels. Then he would actually have the patient do what's called stress radiology. He would take specific shots of the spine under stress. And then he would send out to a company like Spinal Kinetics, and we would actually accurately measure how much excessive motion there is here in the spine. Now, just to kind of give you an idea, these 2 motion units are what are called a grade 2 sprain. It's a non-rateable finding. It doesn't qualify for a rating in the AMA guides. These 2 motor units right here are severe, and they qualify for a rateable level of 25% impairment. In other words, if the patient has this, the AMA guide says 25% of their activities of daily living are going to be negatively influenced either now or into the future. So it's very, very strong. And the whole reason why I liked it as a doctor, as a treating doctor, is it's not me saying it. It's been consensus for a long time. So people can argue, but when you're arguing, it's harder to argue with facts. It's harder to argue with objectivity. It's harder to argue with things that have consensus. You know, everybody's good at arguing. Now, this same thing, even what I just showed you, if we have, let's get this out of the way. If we have this, what I was saying to you before is if we have this in extension, then there's also a good chance that we actually have disc herniation. So there are patients, and this is really difficult. This is what I teach, and this is what we're doing on our site, and this is the education process that we'll be going through to say, look, if you have a neck and you have a back injury, you want to work with a doctor that understands these injuries. Because if you're working with a doctor that's just, okay, God, we took x-rays, we don't even really look at the x-rays, or we sent them out to a radiologist for a 35-second read, and it came back with, well, they got degenerative disc disease and no subluxation, no sign of spinal instability, and that was it. You've had quite a deficient evaluation, because if a person has severe excessive motion and they have a disc herniation, the thing that they need the most, if that was your daughter or your son or somebody you really cared about, the part that you will care the most about, you don't care at that point, oh, is delivered in an auto injury, good, we're going to get all kinds of money. What you care about is, with that loved one, is who do I find to get them help so they don't suffer from this thing for the rest of their lives? Because you can be quite miserable. And so it's knowing and understanding that these things are there. And again, they're in the AMA guides. They have been in there since 1993. Now, if you want to, I wrote a report called The 3 Biggest Pitfalls with MRI and Spinal Ligament Injury Diagnosis. If you want a copy of that, you just go to smartinjuryradiology.com and download it. You can download it, and it goes into what I'm about to show you now. So this is what every one of your MRI reports look like. And there are many problems with MRI, and it's supposed to say and spinal ligament injury diagnosis. Sorry for the top typo. There's many problems with it. Again, the MRI is good for a disc study, and how you know it's a disc study is because they always start at C2 and C3 because that's where the first disc is. So you're going to see on a report, on every report you look at, that it's a disc study. I mean, 30%, 33% of the critical ligaments in the spine are right here, and there's no disc associated. This area is imaged, but you're not going to see anything about it in the report. So the MRI, there's nothing in the cranial-cervical junction mentioned. Now, I'm going to bring up some common symptoms that are associated with the cranial-cervical junction injury. These are those. Now, you as paralegals and you as an attorney, you're going to say, oh my gosh, you know, I had this patient we had patients in that were talking about, you know, they had facial pain and they thought they had sinus congestion that was severe since the accident. And everybody's thinking they're malingerer and they just want money, and they're focusing too much on their symptoms, and they've got somatization syndrome, which means that they're focused on their condition. Well, the reason why they're focused on their condition is they're not finding anybody that's actually saying, oh, wow, this is consistent with what you have. So in an MRI, there is no upper cervical reed. In an MRI, which you can pick up easily on X-ray, in an MRI, there's 9 other ligaments around that disc. I mean, every once in a while, in all the years I've been practicing and all the years I've been looking at reports, I've never seen what I'm about to say to you. So it's pretty easy just to say, look, they don't ever talk about the anterior longitudinal ligament being damaged, or the posterior, or the capsulars, or the interspinous, or the supraspinous, ligamentum flavum, the inner transverse ligaments. So it's a disc study, and only 10% of the ligament structure in the spine is disc. No excessive motion on any of these reports. It's not designed for that. So it's not a flaw of it. It was never designed to pick it up. So you know, you could have a disc, or you could have a MRI that has no disc herniation at all, but has severe ligament damage. And this is severe ligament damage. So you could also have a disc herniation that has no excessive motion associated with it. This is going to repair a lot easier than this. So again, this is the one that has severe excessive motion above and at the level. This one is going to take a lot longer, and it's going to take a lot more care in most instances to get this to recover. And in most instances, these are severe, but with good chiropractic, good physical therapy, good conservative care, a lot of patients will recover from these, but they take a lot longer. And if the insurer is made aware of the fact that this is what they have, then there's more benefits open up, just like the house. You know, if all you said there was a roof damage when the tree hit, and you just reported roof damage, but you didn't report damage to anything else, of course you're going to have a fight the whole way as you're trying to repair the house, with the insurer saying you're over treating, you know, this is excessive. And it's simply because the underlying injury itself was never reported. So at Spinal Kinetics, what we do, we're the only national radiology company that does stress testing. We do ligament testing of the spine, and all of our studies are performed by board-certified medical radiologists. And so just what I showed you, the graph, we do excessive motion testing, and all the studies are handled by 2 licensed professionals. And if they're rateable, they usually get a 3rd look. So they go through 3 looks to make sure that we're accurate with what we're saying the measurements are. And if they're an unusual study, they may actually get 4 looks. They may get a 4th look. So we have pretty stringent quality control to make sure that our measurements are good. Now, the reason why that's important is because in your smaller offices with your smaller providers, your providers try to do this stuff on their own. I mean, they'll get out a pencil, they'll get out a ruler, they'll get out a caliper, a set of calipers, and they'll try to measure these, and they'll put those measurements in a report. Happens a lot with chiropractors. Not a lot, but it happens with chiropractors because they they're thinking more with, okay, geez, I've only got $5,000. I don't know what your coverages are in Georgia, but they'll, I've only got $5,000 worth of coverage, so I'm not sending out for a $540 test. My board certified medical radiologist, instead I'm going to do it myself, and I'm not going to, eat up that $5,000 worth of coverage, even though they're going to get cut off at $2,500, and now they're expecting you to actually get them fully paid. So they kind of, they try to save a penny to skip over a dollar. And so it costs them. So what we do, again, we're a professional company that does this type of testing, and we help improve the professionalism of the providers, and we make it a lot easier, because what I said to you is, look, doctors need to diagnose incredibly well. They need to treat incredibly well. And then they also need to document. And I could spend hours on documentation, things that not, when I say hours, not a lot of hours, but on other things that doctors can do besides that make your job a lot easier. Today, what I wanted to focus on was diagnosis, of just getting the injury diagnosed. There's three things. There's three derangement patterns. There's fractures, there's excessive motion, and there's disc herniation. And a person can have a combination of all three. They could have two, they could have just one of the three. But how you determine excessive motion is you got to work with a company that will get you accurate excessive motion measurements. And that's what we do with Spinal Kinetics. If you're interested or you need help, we have flyers. That's a picture of a flyer that, doctors can be emailed to say, okay, this is what this is. We want this done. I mean, if I was running an attorney firm, the reason why I got a law degree was I thought at one point, and I mean still at some point, run law firms, and run the aspect of, okay, here's the streamlined documentation that we need from our doctors, because this is what the insurers need. And if the insurers have what they need, it's a lot easier. The whole resolution process is a lot easier. You know as well as I do that nationally, I think 1 or 2% of the cases, your firm could be completely an outlier here, go to trial. But you want to have them set up, and the thing that gets them to settle quickly without trial is the thing that actually gets them to settle hugely in trial if it needs to go to trial. They're the same factors. It's still the documentation. So one of the things that I do is, I've written reports. Now, this is for a program. So I train doctors, and I also train attorneys. We're just launching a program for attorneys. And that's called, and I'm just bringing this up. I don't care. I'm not trying to make a pitch here or anything else, but this is a soft tissue injury mastery course for lawyers. And what it does is it goes over a complete course that's very simple, 5-10-minute videos, a number of them, on various topics that make it very simple for you to understand. Now, the more you understand, the easier it is for you to go out and communicate to a group. And if you're right now, you may speak soft tissue injury a little bit, but if you learn the language of soft tissue injury and you go speak it to the providers, you're going to be like, they'll drop over. They'll go, where have you been? How do you know this? Because so few attorneys do know soft tissue injuries. They know, okay, this is what it's going to resolve to, or this is what it's going to settle for, or this is what this court does, and this is what the past have solved for. And they know that aspect of sort of the brokering of the settlement, but not the key factors and how to find them, so that the patient, again, I'm one that just promotes a patient should have access to any benefits they're entitled to. And if that's $1 million, it's $1 million. If it's, $20,000, it's $20,000, whatever it is. But the only way they have access is through the documentation, and the only way they have access, anyone who does that, is they have to understand the injuries. So we sell that course, an online course, for $29.97. Right now it's being sold for $14.97. We also have a marketing program that helps the attorneys go out and market to the DCs particularly. But once you understand the DC market, it's just as easy take that information and put it into the medical market or any other place. We sell that for $2.99 a month. Right now it's $97 a month. And that's at smartinjurylawyers.com. So what I want to do now, though, is just the main focus I wanted to be on was just the diagnosis of the injuries and then any questions that you might have on just that topic today.
Okay.
So now I'm open for Q&A.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so what type of X-ray? So basically you need a doctor who's willing to do a certain type of X-rays and then send this to y'all for analysis.
Yeah, so, but the X-rays they're familiar with. See, like I have a lot of experience in the injury market with both attorneys and doctors. Okay, so do you have any idea what the biggest complaint in the chiropractic profession is about the attorneys?
Probably not getting paid.
No, there's an underlying one. There's one that is such a common, when I go out, if I could take an attorney or if I have an attorney, sometimes I'll be doing seminars and I'll have a couple of attorneys in the room and I say, okay, now listen to this. I'm going to do a market survey for you right now. Because remember, if you know what the problem is and you can provide a solution, then you can, that's marketing. I'm going to show you the X-rays right. I don't know, I must have passed them. So the biggest complaint that they will never tell you about is that you don't understand the injuries that they're treating. Therefore, you can't get a fair settlement because you simply don't understand how injured the patient was.
Okay.
That's the largest complaint they have. So if they were to, now they will, just like you will communicate and say, well, geez, your documentation is so poor. But when you meet them, you won't tell them that. Look, we can't even read you got to take a handwriting class or, this stack of 1-inch computerized reports that none of my paralegals or anybody knows anything of. Most of this stuff is just waste. It's interesting and everything else, and it makes for a good binder. But we need to know, basically you need to know 5 things. And you need to know these 5 things all the time. You need to know all the injuries. You have to have all the injuries diagnosed and fully shown objectively. You need to have any permanent injuries identified as permanent. You need to have anything that the patient from that permanent injury is now unable to do without causing discomfort or pain. You need that very clearly identified. You need anything that the patient absolutely cannot do that they could do prior to the injury clearly identified. And if they have a permanent injury and they have things that they can do but do under duress, or they have things that they can't do anymore, and they're still suffering, then they also are open to future care recommendations. Then future care becomes available to them as a benefit. You have to have that simply we have a simple for doctors for an exit exam. We have that in a simple 2-page document that explains so that any attorney or any adjuster or any orthopedist or any neurologist or anybody should be able to look at it and say, oh wow, here's laid out the injuries. Here's what they did. Here was the treatment. Here's how they identified the injuries. Good. So I have all my MRI or excessive motion testing on X-ray or CT, however you identified it. And then, oh wow, here's the impairment level it correlates to. And oh, here's the patient form that says this is what they couldn't do as a result of these injuries. Oh, this is what the medical specialist said they could expect in the future, and this is some of the medical things that they may need to experience in their future as a result of these injuries. If you had those 5 things that I said in every single file, and you knew how to file them, and then you knew how to put them in a report, because remember, you have to put those things in your demand report. Because if they're not in your demand report, then as far as the insurance carrier is going, you haven't made a claim for them. So your client in Georgia is got State Farm insurance, and they're hit by Allstate, right? So you go through 7 months of chiropractic care. They went to the emergency room, and they went to a medical doctor and got some injections, and now they're ready to settle their case. Sound pretty average, pretty standard?
It's what they
That's
have.
well, does it sound like something that you guys run into that, right?
Yeah, that would be an average type case.
All right, average case. Okay, good. So now they have all the documentation from the shot doctor, from the orthopedist, from the emergency room, and from the chiro. Now everybody in the market somehow thinks that all that information is dumped onto a 23-year-old claims adjuster that's 1 year out of school, who's got 500 files on their desk, who's working with a software system that's going to evaluate the value of the claim, and somebody thinks that that person is meticulously going to go through all the records from all three of those providers and make sure they don't miss any important findings to get into that computer system that's going to spit out a number that now when they call you, you're going to get your initial offer. They don't do that. They put the general diagnostic findings in there, and the only way they get those in is through a scanned HCFA form. So they scan the HCFA form, and that fields the diagnosis. Then they type in how much treatment and what were the costs. Well, that's a very deficient picture. That's like the house. That's like them taking that house that I showed you at first and going, no one's meticulously went through and went, well, hey, the carpet downstairs was damaged. It was 24 by 14 square feet. So they can go, oh, 24 by 14 square feet. Okay, good. What kind of carpet? All right, this is what that is per square foot. To redo it and to lay it, and you got to have the pad. And was there anything that said that the floorboard need to be? Oh yeah, it said the floorboard need to be changed out. Okay, so we got to add that to the value of the claim.
Okay, Jeffrey, can I just interrupt for a second? What does a report look like that your company generates?
Let's see if I got one here on my computer. That's a very good question.
And are these reports that the doctors order from you?
Are they what?
Are they reports that the doctor, an MD, like an orthopedist, would order? They send the x-rays up and you send the report back? Is that how it works?
Yeah. Yes. Well, let me see. I'm on a different computer than I'm normally on. Let me see if I got something here.
So the doctor has to request them, or we do?
I think the doctor would have to request.
Go ahead. What was it?
Does the doctor request this report from you, or is that something our office requests?
No, the doctor does. So it's no different than a doctor sending out for an MRI. The only thing that the doctor does is they're sending us their x-rays.
Okay.
And we're performing a service on the x-rays.
And these are just standard x-rays is what you're saying?
Well, they're stress x-rays, but yes, for all practical purposes.
Because we've seen them from chiropractors before where they'll take x-rays and they'll draw pencil marks on it saying this angle's different from this angle and therefore it's a subluxation and that type of thing.
Right. So that's not going to.
I've never had much luck with the chiropractic testimony unless we have an MD backing it up.
That's correct. But they oftentimes do not understand that. Hold on just a second. I'm going to have one sent over to me. So basically, what they see, the thing is with those pencil drawings or those drawings, those are drawings for a lot of, there were some techniques in chiropractic that used drawing analysis in order to determine where they were going to adjust and how they were going to adjust. And so there's a lot of differences in chiropractic. That's one of the challenges of chiropractic, actually. So what all we want to do, or all we do is ours are generated, and I'm trying to see if I.
Yeah, have you ever had any neurosurgeons apply this work, or spinal surgeons?
I tell you what, the difficult time with that, Gene, is that when you're dealing with neurosurgeons or you're dealing with that level, they're involved in hospital systems. And when they're dealt in hospital systems, you have a whole committee to be able to determine what you're going to be able to do. Right? So for that testing, for them to go out and say, well, we're going to send out for a report from Spinal Kinetics let's accept this, is outside of their normal routine. Have we had neurosurgeons look at them? Sure. It should be.
Yeah, as a doctor, I mean, somebody's got to pay for this. I guess, does he bill the patient? Is that kind of how it's done, or is it just
Say that one more time.
pay for this? Will Blue Cross Blue Shield pay for this type analysis?
Will Blue Cross Blue Shield? No. Now here's why. Let me explain that one. Have we ever had Blue Cross Blue Shield pay for it? Yes. Okay, it's a $540 test. It would probably take us 20 hours to get it paid for by Blue Cross Blue Shield. We need you involved, the attorney involved, and the patient involved to get it paid by Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Now, will somebody from your firm spend 5 to 10 hours with us working through India, through their call centers, to actually work with us to get it paid? No. So we say, do they pay for it? No, because quite frankly, we can't afford to do what it would take to get it paid through that service because it's such a low number. The reason for that is, Gene, is that we're a national company, so we're not in networks. So then even if we do get it paid, it goes to the patient. And so we just went, no, we don't. We'll bill it. We'll get the denial, and we won't fight the denial because it's way too hard.
So this becomes a client cost, basically, client medical cost?
Say that again?
It becomes a cost to the client for medical treatment.
I'm not sure I understand the question, though.
I mean, just like paying a medical, it becomes another medical bill.
So it's just a medical bill for Blue Cross Blue Shield?
So who do you send the bill to? Do you send it to the doctor, the client, our firm?
Good. So great. That's a great question. So we'll bill anybody. We'll send it to Blue Cross Blue Shield. We don't bill Medicare. We don't deal with Medicare. So when doctors send in to us, they send us the patient information, a prescription form, and the patient sign off that they know they're going to have this test done. As far as insurance, all auto carriers cover it. As far as work comp, all workers comp jurisdictions cover it, but each state has some different rules and regulations to it, right? So some, they may have to be pre-authorized. So the provider may have to get it pre-authorized before it's paid. So each are a little different. On the Blue Cross Blue Shields, Aetna's, United Healthcare, we can bill them, but we're not going to get paid with them. And then doctors will also put them into, we have just straight third party. It's just going to the attorney. If the patient comes in and they're unrepresented, we have lots of cases like this. They're unrepresented and they have no insurance. The patient gets a bill. On the bill, they're told that they have this bill. It's $540. They can pay it now, or they can pay it at the time they settle. We just need them to know they have a bill.
So you do this on a lien?
Yeah, totally. And we're really easy to work with the attorney. The attorney has a cut. We take cuts like everybody else. So we're probably one of the easiest companies to work with, because what we're more interested in is getting the patient, and believe it or not, getting the patient's injuries identified. We're interested, our long-term goal is that the earlier these things get identified, the quicker and the better the results will be with the patients that have them. So I know in the PI world, in an injury world where everybody's arguing and everybody thinks it's all about money, it is, but at the same time, our whole purpose is early and accurate identification of these conditions so that the treatment innovators will innovate so that this is not the #1 cause of pain and disability in the world today. This is yeah, go ahead.
Okay, what type of medical articles do you have that we could give to a doctor such that an MD, such that he would think he would want to send these x-rays off for review?
Well, first of all, if I'm in your shoes, then this is kind of the way I look at it. This is the way when I'm consulting attorney firms, and you're not gonna fire out of the box this way, but that doctor or that doctor's manager or that doctor's business manager wants to get paid, right?
Sure.
Good. So they're relying on you to get paid, right?
Right.
Okay. But if their reports are deficient of the injury, how do you get them paid? You don't.
The question is, why would a doctor, do you have something we could show, say, an orthopedist saying,
Yeah, that report.
You go ahead and get this, and we can find out the full extent of this patient's injury.
Yeah, basically that report that I showed you with the 3 biggest pitfalls with MRI and spinal ligament injury, that report really communicates the fact that, hey, MRI has one function, but excessive motion testing has another completely different function.
Is that the article you wrote?
Yeah, and we published research on it. So we have published research, but the biggest thing that I've found is you just have the doctors call us, either send them a flyer, which we can send you guys a flyer. You send them a flyer, you send them something that says, call these guys, talk to these guys. Set up an appointment with one of the doctors there, with the lead radiologist, or with Dr. Kronk there, who's the director of education, and understand that we think that the better the injuries are documented, the easier the settlement process and the easier it is for us to get you paid. See, my big thing with large providers, just so you guys know, my big thing with large providers is large providers are going, okay, geez, we have providers that are doing 500 cases a month. Okay, well, if you take an average of $6,000 a case, and they're doing 500 cases a month, that's $3 million a month. So what do you think their reductions are? 1.5 million a month. Well, why are they getting reduced? Because the people that they're working with to settle them can't settle them because they don't actually have the injuries diagnosed. They don't have the full injuries diagnosed. So when doctors start fully working with the full injuries diagnosed, I can show you testimonial after testimonial after testimonial of, wow, we started working with Spinal Kinetics and we had 2 cases that were, $13,000 worth of care and no attorney, and we never ever had the insurance company pay us in full or not give us a problem, and now we're getting paid in full.
All right, now I see a report up here, and it says also in item 3, it says.
Yep. So what this report looks like, so let's go to that. Here's a Spinal Kinetics report. This is an old one, but they still look very similar to this. It just says, okay, this is what we're doing. We're not doing an X-ray read. We're doing this to determine ligamentous and alignment factors in the spine so they can be accurately diagnosed and an accurate treatment plan can be done. So we look at the lateral cervical spine and we see if there's any abnormal position of that, although that's pretty benign. You don't get a lot of information from just a straight lateral cervical spine. Then we do the cervical motion study. And in this case, it says the motion segment integrity is ratable at C3. That means that there's serious excessive ligament motion at C3, and the AMA guides says that finding triggers a 25% whole person impairment.
And you say these are x-rays taken under stress, which means they're flexion extension x-ray?
Yep. So it means that they were taken under stress. Flexion extension.
Very hard to
But I can see that in on the one on the right, I guess I see one on the left too. So these are those commonly called bone spurs when they're kind of overlapping like that, when the front of the disc is kind of
Yeah, but here's the thing. First of all, okay, so let's say right now these bone spurs are where you see right here, right?
Right.
Okay, good. So let me show you something once. This is C2, this is C3, this is C4, this is C5, and this is C6. So somebody's going to say, hey, we got a pre-existing condition here. Okay, right?
Right.
All right. This report says, hey, you got serious ligament damage right here, and guess what? There's no pre-existing condition there. So you got to think of the leg like the neck like your leg. So if I said to you, you injured your leg, and I said you got a leg sprain, you would laugh, right? Because your first question would be, well, that's kind of funny, doctor, but where did I sprain my leg?
Right.
If you said, well, he's suffering from a lower extremity sprain, the first thing anybody logically would say, well, what joints were damaged?
Right. Okay. Got it.
Okay, so this patient has severe damage in an area that has no pre-existing condition. Now, part of the training program that I do with attorneys is I teach, because this is what I did for my thesis, law thesis, was the law of pre-existing condition. The law of pre-existing condition means that if you have an active pre-existing condition, far different than a dormant pre-existing condition. If you have a dormant pre-existing condition, it's not part of the causation analysis. If you have an active pre-existing condition and now you have a trauma on top of an active pre-existing condition, then you have to do an apportionment. But what's happened, and this is why the education that I'm talking about is so important for attorney. The education I'm talking about, I believe in the future, there won't be a personal injury attorney that represents spinal injuries that doesn't know the information that's contained in this course. Because what's happened is everybody's compressed the spine. There's 160 joints associated with the spine. So this has been compressed into just, well, this is a neck. For a doctor like me, that's like saying, well, you know, he has a leg injury. Well, what doctors will say, well, what's the problem? You know, well, my attorney's having a hard time selling this case. Well, what does the patient have? He has a neck injury. I'm saying, okay, well, now I'm probably getting an idea of why he has a hard time selling your case. What in the neck was injured? And how did you determine how badly it was injured? Because this report now on a severe C3 injury completely negates any problem that you would have or should have or used to have. And like I said, once you understand the law of pre-existing, you understand the law, and I'm not trying to say that you don't understand the law, but there's the law of pre-existing conditions.
Now, are they like facet joint injuries? Would that be the same as what you're showing us?
Well, if you injured the facet, so it's impossible to injure, let me show you something else. It's impossible to injure a facet unless you fracture it. So the only thing I'm going to tell you is you could, as long as we're not talking fracture, okay? It is impossible to injure a facet without seeing excessive translation on the x-ray. It's impossible. Now, if you dislocated it, you're going to see severe translation. This is going to translate severely, and it'll be stuck.
Now, those are type of injuries that are typically treated with injections.
Well, the company that I'm on the board of, there's 9 million injections done a year, right? So the injection market is a whole market unto itself. Anybody that has any kind of pain or anything else can get an injection, right? But
What often use the term facet joint injury, and they seem to get injections. That's just
that's because they're just used to, they're just saying something that, like, most people don't know anything. They go, okay, gosh, they're professionals, so I don't really know what that is, but they must know what it is, and this is why they do injections. A facet joint can require adjustment, physical therapy, traction, injections, ablation procedures, nerve burns, and spinal fusions. So you have the whole gamut that can be applied to a facet injury. In the same one, because remember, in surgical procedures today, and this is hard sometimes for attorneys who are in the injury work and just in injury work, but a lot of the jurisdictions for like Blue Cross Blue Shield and places like that will have you have to get pre-authorized for a spinal surgery. You can't just go in the old days where the doctor could just say, hey, yeah, he needs a spinal surgery, and people were getting surgeries left and right. So then they cracked down and they said, okay, well, look, we have guidelines for spinal surgeries. You have to pre-authorize, and the patient has to have certain factors in order for a pre-authorization to occur. Excessive motion is one of them. Has to be identified in some pre-authorizations. Now, the other thing that most will have is that you have to have a 3 or 6 month conservative care failure before you can pre-authorize. So a physical therapist, a chiropractor, they define conservative as those things. That care would have to fail. So the same thing that is, and many times it doesn't fail. So the things on the lower conservative level are applied first, and then you work your way up.
Okay. Now you showed the pictures here. We're looking at the ankylation and translation. They show basically looks like a torn ligament. Is that a sprained ligament as you're referring to it?
Yeah, well, this is just our artist rendition of the ligament is damaged, so therefore it's failing to hold it in place and it opens up too much. Or
do these grow back when they're like that?
No, it's permanent. No, they don't. Now with stem cells in the future, yeah, maybe. But the stem cells would probably have to be applied, 2 to 4 weeks into treatment. And right now, stem cells are, nobody's using them in the injury. Well, very few are using them in the injury market yet.
Yeah. If there's motion, you gotta show motion before you go in to do surgery. What are they doing surgery on, the ligament or the spine?
Yeah, they do the surgery. They don't. Do they stitch the ligaments back, or they just leave them like that? And they just
they fuse the vertebra.
Yeah. They just kind of bypass the ligament.
Well, the ligaments, they know the ligament's never going to be stable enough to hold it, so they just fuse it.
Okay.
They just fuse it together.
And typically, how are the neurosurgeons diagnosing this loose spine now, or the excessive motion now?
Patient comes in, bends their head forward, and they say, look, they've got pain in the neck, fine, they got spinal instability in the spine.
Okay.
And then State Farm hires their one that looks and says, no, they don't.
Yeah. There's just a range of motion test.
Pretty much. I mean, you'd be surprised how little testing they do. But since they're an authority or high on the authority, then it's just by their word still.
It seems like insurance is going to pay for this before they authorize the surgery.
Well, but you got to remember, there's a couple different things that work here, right? So what you're talking about is like the Blue Cross Blue Shields. Yeah, eventually they will. Okay, but if you're talking about the injury market, well, this testing shows a serious injury. right now, if I mean, we've been I'm all over the country, so there's imaging centers, and I don't know, maybe you know imaging centers in your area, but imaging centers routinely in the injury market will get held up. Their claims will get held up. They start getting well, everything's examination under oath. So now all of a sudden, every claim, the radiologist who read the report has to go under oath, has to testify, has to do this, has to do that, and they still deny the claim. And they force the imaging company to, so like I can think of one where they forced the, State Farm owed, I don't know, 800,000 in claims. So after 2 years, they forced the provider to actually take State Farm to court. And State Farm was pretty open about, look, we can do this for a long time, or we can settle if you want, 200,000, we'll do that right now. Well, they just saved 400,000, but what the biggest thing that gets missed in all of that is when you deny a service, you deny the finding into the system. If a service was determined by a third party to be medically not necessary, it does not go into the system. That's why it's so important for you to have it in your demands.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier the cervical cranial junction. How do you examine that? Is that part of the?
Yeah, because doctors send us in these views, and then we measure that.
That looks like it's a different type. That's not a flexion extension. That's something else.
Well, it's a stress. Anytime that we're just stressing that joint, so it's called an A to P open mouth stress shot. We're just stressing the joint. You stress it to the right, and you stress it to the left. These are two different people here, and the only thing I was trying to show here is just when I pulled some slides up this morning to put in here was just to show you what it looks like when it's not slipping at all, and to show you what it looks like when it's badly slipped. So that's the patient that has chronic headaches. That's the patient that has migraine headaches. That's the patient that has ear pain. That's the patient that has dizziness. That's the patient whose eyes might be, they think they have problems with their eyes, or they feel like their memory or their concentration isn't good. That's also the thing that we're finding that the NFL football players have in association with the concussions and the mild traumatic brain injuries.
They're having misplaced or displaced.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the basic cord and all the cerebral spinal fluid come through here, and depending on how offset this can be, you can start to have some dysfunction there, and those dysfunction cause symptoms. So again, the bottom line is that it just becomes really easy to get these injuries identified. And, once you understand it and right now you'll understand it from you'll understand it from a PowerPoint. That's why I do a whole training program. And I go, okay, these ligament injuries, gosh, how long do they take to heal? Gosh, what are the costs involved with that? Gosh, what is the law of pre-existing condition? What are the 5 factors that I need to have? What simple form could I send to a doctor and say, hey, fill this simple form out for me? And right now, you and your paralegals would go, wow, they don't have 3/4 of the pertinent information that I need to resolve the claim. So then you'd ask, okay, can you give me this, this, and this? And what you would find is if you had that information and you put that information in and got the insurer to put it in, you'll resolve your claims a lot quicker and a lot faster and a lot more of what you want, which is, higher settlement results.
Yeah, I think the most difficult thing is going to get the MDs to kind of start doing this. I think you send this form to them and you say you need this information, and basically if you contact Spinal Kinetics, you can get this information.
Well, not the forms. The forms are in the training program I do as far as that's for the attorneys who are in a training program or doctors who are in a training program. It's just for me to hand forms out to doctors that don't know what the forms are. It's confusing. So what I'm going to tell you right now is your easiest way to start is, and I'm going to try to say this as nicely as I can, but I'm an objective guy, so let me show you objectively. So I'm going to show you something once right now, real quick, because we'll be looking at this a lot. So right here in low back, these are non-specific low back return to work guidelines for medical doctors. They're published in the American Family Physician. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time with you on this, but here's a risk factor. The cause of low back pain in injury work cannot be clearly identified in 90% of the patients. So 90% of the patients in the system right now are not working with a doctor that understands how to diagnose their condition. Now, it says some physical demands, and including manual lifting, bending, twisting, and whole body vibration are associated with increased likelihood of low back pain. It should be noted that association is not equivalent to causation. However, there is strong evidence that personal and occupational psychosocial variables play a more important role than the spinal pathology that we can't find 90% of the time, or the physical demands of the job. So it's pretty insane in the market right now, and the medical providers are actually the least. They understand this the least. Now, they treat it a lot, but their guidelines that I could pull up time and time again actually show that their number one diagnosis is called non-specific mechanical low back pain or non-specific mechanical neck pain. So when you have that, at the same time, they'll say that as many as 90% of the persons with occupational nonspecific low back pain are able to return to work in a relatively short amount of time. Now, how can you not know what's causing the problem, but say that just because we don't know what the problem is, most of these people can go back to work right away? That's the problem you have with medicine right now. Now, their treatment is antidepressants and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and of course, opiates. And all those things have shown to double and triple disability rates. So at the same time, they say in their own guidelines, they say the management of low back pain and determining the patient's safe return to work are common issues encountered by family physicians. Challenges include the unfamiliar with the patient's job demands, complex work compensation systems, and a vast array of diagnostic and therapeutic interventions with questionable effectiveness and value. So they'll say 90% of the time, we're not really sure what the problem is, and we know that most of the things that we do don't work. Now, I don't have a problem with that, but I have a problem if we're not acknowledging it and trying to change it. So that's what we're doing on injury sites. That's what we're doing, because the public doesn't deserve to have super, super expensive bills and ineffective care. So when you're looking at this type of testing, your best providers at first are chiropractors. They understand it, at least. And they usually will work with the medical doctors to get them to understand it.
Well, that might be the best way to try to talk to medical doctors.
They're the ones that have ordered the type of x-rays,
Yeah.
the doctors.
Chiropractor can do this, actually.
Yeah, probably.
Probably is getting validated.
Yeah, I mean, your chiropractors in Georgia are gonna, they shoot x-rays, they'll take x-rays, and they will understand this. That's why I said, if you want, I can give you a flyer, we'll help you any way that you would like. I don't have a lot of time because we're deep into, like I said, the injury site that we have will be the health grades for injury care.
We'll flyers and we'll see what we can do with some of the local chiros down here.
We've got cranial bone injury that he was looking at. Is there pain associated with that? I mean, did the clients know they had that injury up there?
The cranial.
Yeah, way up there in the brain.
No, he said it was
I
to,
know it's an issue, but I don't.
no, he said the symptoms are clicking in your neck, ear
Yeah,
pain,
but I know
facial pain,
they had-
vision.
They don't have any pain at the time of the injury or anything? There's no injury pain?
Mm-mm.
I don't know.
What's the question?
What were the symptoms that you had listed for the cranial?
I know what those symptoms were, but
Cranial
did
cervical
they
joint.
Do they actually have pain in the cervical area at the same time? Or is it
Sure.
just symptoms?
No, neck pain,
Okay, there's neck pain.
recurrent disturbed vision, severe fatigue, sinus congestion, tinnitus, vertigo, worsening of symptoms with neck motion, migraine headaches, memory problems, loss of voice, lightheadedness. These are all coming from the nerves that come out of here. So if this nerve right here is damaged, the American Neurological Association or the American Association of Neurosurgeons will say that patients can actually experience pain in their hair when they comb it.
Hmm.
Now, if you come in and you say, well, the patient's saying that their hair is, they've got pain in their scalp when they comb their hair and it's pretty sensitive, everyone looks at them as they're insane. They must, they're trying to get more money. But yet, these conditions, understood, the consensus is huge. It's just no one knows, even the doctors that are treating them oftentimes don't know that. So if you knew it and you shot them over the information and all of a sudden they know it, their documentation just doubled. And your job and the pain and stress that you feel in trying to gather the documentation reduces. So that's the beauty of it. And it's really easy. This stuff is not hard. It's not hard to understand. It's just that nobody's taught it before. Nobody's teaching anybody. And the idea has been just, okay, let's go out, let's get injury work, let's solicit attorneys for referrals. The injuries want less care, smaller bills, flip the bills. And and if you really think about it, everybody in the market for the longest time has profited by patients not getting it well, by not recovering. The longer it takes and the worse the recovery, the more doctor's bills there are. The longer and worse that takes, the larger the bill, the larger the recovery is for the attorney. So the market has produced really poor injury results in the doctors and really poor documentation of the injuries and really even poor understanding of the injuries themselves. The newer doctors and the doctors that are really coming to fruition, that will come to fruition in the market, because the market is not tolerating. It's not just personal injury. It's work comp. It's the whole market. The market is now starting to go, we need to do a lot better with these injuries. I mean, we can't have 4 million car accidents this year and have 2 million chronic pain patients as a result of the 4 million injuries. Because that 2 million becomes 4 million, becomes 8 million, becomes 16 million, and the costs are too large. It's astronomical costs. So we have to have doctors that are a lot better with treating these injuries. And that's where that's where we come in, and we just happen that injuries always interface with the medical legal interface. So of course you're involved with attorneys and depots and all kinds of things.
Okay.
Now, I have got to be on a call in about, I'm just looking at my clock. Normally I don't go this long. I've got to be on a call in about 2 minutes.
I just want to thank you. I know we kept you longer than you planned, so thank you very much. Interesting. Send us some of those flyers so we can work with some of these hours.
Can someone from your office just call our office and order those flyers?
Sure, yeah, we'll do that.
Okay, if you would, that'd be great. If whoever, just talk to Tracy and she'll send them.
Okay, yeah, I'll give her a call.
Okay, perfect.
All right,
All right.
thank you.
You're very welcome.
I think there's something